All right, hello, and welcome to Analog Conlanging, Part 3, Take 2. So now we've had 2 takes for Part 2 and 2 takes for Part 3. Um, so, first I'm going to explain what's going on. Why is there another Part 3? If you're watching this on YouTube in the future, you're going to be confused. What do you mean there's another Part 3? There's only the one. I will explain. And then what we're going to do is we're going to review all of the conlang we've done for this a priori language. And I will go over what I did since last time and talk about the vocabulary that I've added and some of the things I've tweaked with the grammar. And then we will look at taking these example sentences we were working with to figure out our syntax. We're actually going to have them in the conlang, see what they actually look like and sound like. And then the very last thing will be to brainstorm what we're going to do for the a posteriori conlang, because that will be the next one that we're going to do. And I want to at least figure out general stuff about that so that we don't go into next week without knowing anything about it, just so we can make the most of our time, because it won't take too long, hopefully, to go through everything. Now, I will start by explaining what happened. So last week when I was doing Part 3, lots of tech issues basically meant that I didn't have any sound recorded for any of it, and I just have to do it over again. So if you were here last week and you were wondering why I was so quiet, it was because despite everything telling me that my mic is on, it was not actually recording any sound. So that's why I was quiet. I apologize. But if you were not here, then fear not, because we're going to go over everything I did last week, which was about an hour of mostly reviewing, and then I just barely started doing some of the sentences. I'll just go over those, and then we'll do the rest of the sentences together today. But we are going to start with the very beginning. In Part 1, we talked about sort of the process that we can go through when we're doing a priori conlanguage, conlangs. Conlanguages. I never say conlanguages. That's so funny. Conlangs in a journal. And so what I started with was just the overall tasks that need to get done. I started with goals, then semantic considerations I want to keep in mind as I move forward through this conlang based on the goals. Talking about how the language is going to be structured. How am I going to communicate things happening in the language? What kind of morphology I'm going to have. So like how are words going to be made up and convey those things? What is it going to sound like? And then finally, like, what if there's going to be a special spelling for things, or if I'm going to make a writing system. I'm not going to make a special writing system for this language, I decided. At least not right now. I might come back to this language, we'll see. And then any revisions, which is what I have been doing since last week. Or I guess 2 weeks ago, not counting last week because last week was a bit of a bust. So that's the overall tasks, and I should cross off more of these as we go because I've definitely done most of these. I've basically done all of the checkboxes at this point, but I'm going to cross them off as we go through them one more time. So we started with our goals, and this is to be an a priori demonstration, show like making a language from complete scratch with no source languages that you're basing it on. Have it be fun, something that I would find fun, which tends to mean I do things that are very typologically not naturalistic when I'm making a priori languages. I used to make a lot of a priori languages that were very naturalistic. And when I say naturalistic, I mean work the way that most or many actual spoken languages in the world work. And I did that for a lot of my life, especially if you're conlanging for a con world project, like if you're doing it for a fantasy setting or sci-fi setting or something like that. Usually the goal is to be somewhat naturalistic. You want to reflect how people would communicate. And I did that for a lot of my life. The past, I don't know, like I want to say 5 years, I've just totally not been in the headspace for that mostly. I love to just experiment now. I just like to do like wacky things with grammar. That most languages would not dare to do. I find that a lot more fun when I'm doing a priori languages. And I usually keep the naturalisticness mostly to a posteriori, although I do weird things with those too. I just like experimenting now. Since I'm not usually making a conlang for a specific goal. I'm not making it for like a fantasy culture or anything like that. I'm just kind of doing it for fun and to play with language, which is what conlanging is meant for some people. Having fun. It's like the linguistic equivalent of, I don't know where I was going with the analogy. It's just messing with language. So the goal, and the final one was single use. I'm not going to do anything special with this language. I like how it came out. I'm enjoying it. I've been enjoying making sentences in this language. But it's not for some higher purpose. It's just as a demonstration. Some semantic considerations that I wanted to keep in mind, just ideas I had for making this language fun and single use in demonstration, was I wanted open parts of speech mostly. There is a grammatical thing that makes something into like a verb functionally, not necessarily verb in the translation, because the syntax is so weird that like often your verb in English is not actually going to be what the verb is in the language, because of the way the syntax works. But other than that, other than like changing parts of speech for making something your main verb in the syntax of the sentence, any content word could be a modifier, an adjective, so like an adjective or adverb. It could be the verb. It could become a verb. It could be a noun. Doesn't matter. Well, it matters, but words are not locked. Basically, is that idea. I wanted physical metaphors for abstract. So if you have an abstract idea, I want there to be some kind of physical thing you're connecting it to in some way, where possible. I think there are certain words where it's like really difficult to do that, but I did my best to keep to that. And visually expressible, just because I wanted to use these little pictures to explain the syntax. So, goals and semantic considerations. Now we're going to talk about syntax. When talking about the syntax, what we did was I drew these pictures. I redrew these. This is not the original paper. I wanted to make it look a little nicer, so I redrew them and relabeled some of the numbers because it got kind of messy with like I had like E1 and E2. I just reassigned everything its own number, just to make things neater. Or not number, letter. There we go. So in A, I had a person under a tree, and I listed sort of like the entities and what was happening in that picture. And I did the same thing here with a person going under a tree. Then I have a crow attacking a person, and then I have a tortoise giving a carrot to a hare. And with all of those things, what we did is we labeled like what role we thought each thing played in that like event happening, and how we wanted to mark them. And when I say mark, I just mean treat similarly grammatically in the language, because I wanted to use word order mostly to denote what role everything has. I didn't want to rely on a bunch of particles and stuff. I have one particle in this language that I ended up wanting and adding, and I will explain that today. But other than that, like I wanted just word order to tell you. So what we ended up with, it was something very strange, and it all kind of hinged on this choice to do something with the ditransitives, the verbs of like where you have two objects, a direct and indirect object, especially in sort of like verbs of giving, where you have a donor, a recipient, and then a theme, which is the gift, and what's happening is giving. And what I talked about is that in some languages, in many languages, when you compare this ditransitive situation to a simple transitive situation like the crow attacks a person, where there's a clear agent, the crow, and patient, the person that is being attacked, many languages will treat the donor, most languages, will treat the donor like an agent. That one's usually going to be the same across languages. Is the person who gives the gift is the person who's doing the verb. They're the giver, so they give the gift to someone. Now, in English, we have a weird situation, actually, with ditransitives in English. I'll come back to English. In most languages that are related to English or that have similar syntax to English, the donor, like most languages, is treated like an agent, and the gift, what we call a theme sometimes, is treated like a patient. The theme and the patient are treated the same. So what is being given? It's the gift. So the agent gives the gift, and then the recipient is in a third sort of category as an indirect object, usually in languages like in most Indo-European languages. The recipient is an indirect object, so they're marked with some kind of other case, like a dative case or something like that. In English, we have the option to do that. That's kind of like historically a thing that we have done. We say, like, in this case, the tortoise gives a carrot to the hare. So what that means, so the tortoise is we treat it like the subject because we usually make our agents the subjects in a active voice sentence. The tortoise gives, so the tortoise is doing the verb, a carrot. A carrot is the direct object of give. It's what they give. Just like a crow attacks a person, the tortoise gives a carrot. And then we say to the hare. English is weird because we also have this thing called dative shift, where we can actually express an indirect object with no preposition and put it before the direct object immediately after the verb. So we can also say the tortoise gives the hare a carrot. So it just sounds like we're saying two objects back to back with no sort of separation in English. And that's called dative shift. The reason we can do that partially is because we used to have a dative case. So like you would just mark hare as dative. You don't need the preposition to. Many languages don't because they have a dative case. Like Latin, you don't need a preposition there. You could just have it be in the case of giving, which will often depend on the verb in Latin. But the hare is already marked dative in Old English, and so you could just say tortoise gave hare dative, carrot accusative, which is what we use for the direct object. The thing, though, is that English no longer has separate accusative and dative cases that are declined for. We don't decline our nouns anymore. So it's just a weird thing now that we can like do that. We can move the recipient to be right after the verb. It's called dative shift. But the hare is still technically dative there. It has to be in that position for us to understand it as the recipient. Some languages do something that is called secondative, which is where they actually treat the recipient like the patient. Like the recipient is in the same role as the person being attacked by the crow. So like just like a crow attacks a person, a tortoise gives a hare something. And that something then, if we're treating the hare like a patient, then we have to treat the carrot like something else. And so what will happen is the carrot gets put into a secondative case. So some other case, could be dative, could be something else. Often it's instrumental or something. Like the tortoise gives a hare using a carrot or something. There's some other case that you put carrot into in some languages. It's not as common as what we have, which is just like the dative situation where we have the recipient be treated like something else and the gift is the patient. That's a lot more common, but there is that other option. We went with a secret third option. And the secret third option we went with is, so if the event, so for each of these we talked about what the entities are. Like here we have a tree and a person, and we have the concept or the relationship of being under, and we said that was a state. Versus B, where the thing is, it's the same entities, a tree, a person, and there's the relationship of being under, but there's motion that the person is causing. And so that changes the roles a little bit in that sentence. So in B, it's a lot more clear. The person is the doer, and they're moving themselves. So they're also the recipient, or not the recipient, the patient. So the way that we ended up doing that is with a reflexive pronoun. So we're going to say the person puts themselves to be in that location. And we made the location the event, just like we had it up here. So what we did was A, which was the very weird thing, and it will make sense once we get back to D, is that, again, location, the being under is what's happening. That's the event, so that's the verb. The person is like receiving that. They're like a patient. And so what we did is we made the tree the agent. And the way that we can kind of justify that in this syntax is with this very strange thing that we're doing with these ditransitives, is that we made, because the carrot is the gift, the carrot is what is happening, is what we decided our syntax is going to do. So whatever you're giving to someone, that is the verb. So we say that the tortoise, if we make the hare the recipient, like in a second-dative language, where the recipient is the patient, so that the tortoise, what does the tortoise do to the hare? The tortoise carrots the hare. They becarrot it. They bequeath a carrot unto the hare. And what that kind of does is it kind of slots into place a very strange thing with the syntax, which is that it almost is like your verb or the predicate is actually the gift or the sort of like imparting that the agent does for or to the patient. So what does the crow give the person? They give an attack. What does the person give to themselves? They give themselves being under. And the tree is like an oblique thing that's like describes where that under is. So then if we go back to A, who is giving person under? The tree. The tree is providing that state of being under to the person. The tree is offering shade to the person, basically, is what we decided. So in this language, you kind of always need an agent. And the agent is going to give the patient the verb. And then there can be other things in the sentence, like the tree in the second sentence, or something else. And we had some more examples up here. We had some more scenarios we wrote. So with a person, here we had a person sleeping in a bed. And to say that, we decided, or I guess I decided, that bed is going to give sleep to the person. The bed is providing a place to sleep for the person. So the bed sleeps the person. And we can contrast that with the person gives themselves sleep in the bed, so they go to bed. That's that same contrast between A and B, where the tree gives the person shade being under. Here the person gives himself being under. Here the bed gives the person sleep. Here the person gives themselves sleep on the bed, and the bed gets put in oblique. And oblique is just the slot that's after the patient in the sort of the order. So the word order that we came up with was the verb, and then I was using T to show that there's going to be some kind of marking on the verb to show that it's a verb, and then the agent, then the patient, and then whatever else in that sentence. Now, what I decided to is add a particle in the case that you have no patient, but you do have an oblique. Like you want something else in your sentence, but there's no patient to act upon, and you don't want to misconstrue this oblique as a patient. So what you do is you put a little particle there. And that little particle, I think, what was the particle? Did I not write it down? I didn't write down the particle. I had it somewhere. I think it was O. I'm fairly certain it was either O or A. Like just the letter O or just the letter A. It might have been A. Well, we're not going to need it for any of the example sentences, so it's fine. I'll add it to my journal when I find it. I have it written somewhere, but it's not somewhere I can access right now. Where was I? Oh, yes. So we have all these different scenarios. I'm not going to explain all the rest of them, but we basically figured out how they were going to be ordered with our syntax. And I also figured out what I wanted to do with subordinate clauses. So if there's a clause that describes something within the sentence. So like instead of saying, let's say for A, I want to say like, all right, let's do B. So if I want to say a person goes under a tree, but I want to describe that person as someone who did something else or something was done to them. So like maybe I want to say like the person I saw yesterday went under the tree. So I saw them yesterday is another sentence kind of embedded to describe a person there. It's a relative clause. Those have a slightly different syntax. The order of all the arguments is the same: agent, patient, slash oblique marker and then oblique. But then we have our verb after. So the verb goes at the end of a subordinate clause. And that's kind of a signal to you. If you see like think, verb, and then another noun, what that's a signal to is that that little thing is actually describing the noun. So that's how subordinate clauses are going to work. The other thing here that I didn't really explain is this adverb dash mod dash thing. So adverbs go before the verb, just like adjectives go before the noun, and they're connected with this little a here. So it's going to be like the thing that you're saying, like the adjective or adverb a, hyphenated a, and then the head, whether it be the verb or the noun. I also decided that there are also going to be compound words where there's none of this, and it's just like you can make new words by smashing them together. And when you do that, it's actually going to shift the stress over. But we'll get to that when we get to the phonology. I also came up with a couple of particles. There's other than the oblique one, there's coordinators. There's da for and t for or, and they're just going to be themselves. You put them between your list items. And that's kind of it. There's nothing special with those. There's no exclusive versus inclusive or anything like that. Those are just the only two I wanted for this toy language, basically. Now, for the morphology, I should cross off syntax. For the morphology, so as I said, I wanted it to be pretty open parts of speech. I want it to be very isolating and analytic. So there's not like a ton of verb conjugation, noun declension, anything like that. There are some verb suffixes that show the mood and evidentiality, and there are possessive prefixes that go with the pronouns to show that something is possessed by someone. There's also, for the verb thing, to make something a verb, there's a form of verbal oplout where the stressed syllable of a content word, which is going to be the penultimate syllable. Why is my pen dying? Now is the worst time for you to be dying. Seriously. I have more pens, but I have to go into the closet to get them out. I think I have a backup in here, don't I? No, I do not. No, I do not. Oh, wait, I do. Okay. Maybe this will work for me. Okay. So the system, the way it works is there are 4 vowels in this language, and they become diphthongs when when the word is used as a verb, and that can end up changing the pronunciation a little bit as well, and we will get into that. These are the suffixes. There are 3 suffixes that mark mood evidentiality. So there's 2 moods, realis and irrealis. So if it's a thing that you're saying is or isn't happening versus a thing that may or may not happen in some like other reality. So realis is mostly going to be used for like most sentences indicating information, like declarative sentences, interrogative sentences. But irrealis is going to be used for things like wishes, hopes, hypotheticals, commands. Those are the main places where you're going to use them. And I already have a verb that actually has a meaning kind of change if you put it into the irrealis, and that gets used for a lot of things. And I will give that example when we get to the vocabulary. There are also some other suffixes that go on the verb. There's a negative suffix to mark the verb for saying that it isn't happening or wouldn't happen. And then there's an additional suffix that would go after that if you do have it there, but if not, you could just go straight to it. And that is a question suffix that marks the sentence as a question by putting that onto the verb. And that's going to be useful because there's a pronoun that can mean one thing with a question and another thing without a question. The realis witness evidentiality, so there are 2 evidentialities within the realis. Witness is just you have the direct evidence yourself, or it's self-evident. Like you saw it, you heard it, you know it from your gut, like you have a very clear understanding of it, or it's just like common sense. Non-witness is that you heard about it, you read about it somewhere, someone told you, but you don't have the direct evidence. It's just like, apparently, like I've heard that this is true, or I read that this is true, or apparently some people say that this is true, but I don't have like the exact evidence for it. And the realis witness is the default, so there's just no marking on the verb. If it's non-witness, there's an eth sound, there's a the, and then if it's irrealis, it's a r, it's a r at the end of the verb. Now, it's to those that you then add these if they're there. If none is there, your verb will end with a vowel, and then so you can go straight to me for the negative, or you could go straight to n, just an n, to mark it as a question. If you do have one of these two, though, you'll need these linking vowels. So like if you have a non-witness realis or irrealis, and then you need a negative, you need that either, ime. Or if you go straight to the question mark, you'll need an a for an. Now, if you have a negative and then a question, like a negative question, you have that e, so you don't need that a. That's why there's so many parentheses here. They're a little confusing. It's just like a if needed, there are those linking vowels. And I will explain why there are grave accents on them in a second, once I get through the pronouns. And there are 6 pronouns in this language. There's a first person exclusive, so yourself and not the person you are talking to. So it does not include your interlocutor, the person you're talking to. It can include other people because none of these are number locked. So this could mean I, or it could mean we, not including you. The first person inclusive means including you. So it generally is going to, like, I don't think there's any situation where it wouldn't mean we in English, but it's a specific kind of we. It's we that includes the person you're talking to. It can be used for like us too, or it can be like you and I and everyone else. Just depends on the context. Then there's a second person, that's you, and it's not specific to singular or plural. Then there's a demonstrative, which is sort of the equivalent of saying like this or that. And this is what we use for third persons. There's no word for like they, he, she, anything like that. It's the demonstrative. That one. That person, that thing, that. Just that's what you use for a third person, is use the demonstrative. Then there is a reflexive pronoun. That means back onto the person themselves. And that's generally going to be used in the third person, because if it's a reflexive first or second person, you're just going to repeat the pronoun again. Like first person inclusive does it to first person inclusive. First person inclusive does it to person inclusive. Second person does it to second person. Or you could do second person does it to first person inclusive. I've actually made an example sentence with that. I don't think we're going to look at it today, though. The reflexive is mostly going to be used for third persons if they're doing it to themselves, and for possession if the possession is the same third person that owns it. And in that way, you can actually kind of use 2 different demonstratives. You can use the demonstrative twice, and it will refer to 2 different people, and it will be clearly referring to 2 different people, because if it were the same person, you'd use the reflexive. So for example, in English, we have some ambiguous situations like he gave him his backpack. He gave him his backpack. So because we didn't say himself, that second him is not reflexive, so it's a different him, but his is ambiguous. Is it his, like the second him's backpack, or is it the original giver's backpack? That's a little ambiguous in English, but in this language it will not be ambiguous, because if it's he gave him his own backpack, then it would be koi to the other koi, and then it would be ri backpack. Whereas if it's he gave him his other backpack, it would be koi ko. And I will explain these possessives in just a second, but I also want to get to the WH/indefinite. So in a question, a sentence marked as a question, this means what or who or why or how as questions. If it's not marked as a question, this function is a little bit different. It means whoever, whatever, whichever of something. So it's more of an indefinite pronoun. It's like someone, something, whoever, whichever thing. And I don't differentiate between like those like quantifiers and indefinite pronouns. English does, but I do not in this language, and that's fine. So one thing you'll notice is all of these have an H in them, and we'll talk about it with phonology, but there is no letter H in this language, like phonetically. It's just there for spelling. The H marks that there's a syllable boundary, so these vowels are not to be read together. It's veal, not veal. It's tau, not tau. And that's important because tau is a sound in the language. Like, o becomes ow when it's a verb. So, ow versus ow in one syllable. So it's two syllables. That's why the H is used. And the H is used at the beginning of words that start with a vowel as well. But all of these have H in them because they all reduce to possessive prefixes. So if you have a noun that's, you want to say it's my whatever, you say, if the word starts with a consonant sound, it's going to be V and then that noun. And I keep the H there, even though H is silent and will not be needed for a consonant. You don't need it to separate the syllables, but I keep the H so that you can see that it's a possessive prefix. So I don't need to put a hyphen because there's an H there. And I think that just kind of looks better. So if you see like an H and then a consonant, you know that you have a possessive prefix. And the same goes for if the word starts with a vowel. That word starts with a vowel, and spelling it will start with an H. Well, you're actually going to like have the H stay. You're not going to get rid of the H because there's a consonant there. You're going to just have the consonant from the beginning of the pronoun followed by H followed by the vowel. So I'll give an example of a word that starts with a vowel, like what's a word that starts with a vowel? Akama. Akama is H-A-K-A-M-A. I will not write it here. I'm going to write it on a sticky note because I don't want it here. Have a little leaf sticking out. So we have the word akama. Akama. Akama means labor or work. If I want to say my work, I just vakama. And I don't get rid of that H, even though there's a consonant there now, and I technically don't need the H. The H is now part of the prefix, so it's my work now. And so the spelling makes it very clear that it's a possessive adjective there. I just thought that would be cool. And it also looks kind of neat to have a VH at the beginning of a sentence. It just kind of looks unique spelling-wise. So that is how the possessive adjectives work. Now we're going to get into the sound system. Okay, so there are 4 vowels in this language, E, E, O, A, and they're spelled I-E-A-O. There are also 4 phonemic diphthongs in this language, which are 2 vowels that are pronounced in the same syllable together. They are A, Ow, Ye, and Wa. And I put their usual phonetic realization here. Since there are so few vowels, I allow for a lot of variation between these, but these are generally how I pronounce them. A, Ow, Ye, Wa. Wa. So those are the diphthongs. And then I have the consonants here. Ma, na, fa, va, ta, da, ga, the, ra, ga. And I spell those pretty much as they are in IPA, except for the r, I spell with a G. I spell with a G. I also have that letter H for hiatus, the beginnings of words that start with vowels, and for possessives, like I explained earlier. Now, a root is typically going to maximally be CV, CV, CV. And that C could also be an H in any of those situations, so like no consonant there, but it will be spelled with an H. The stress goes on the penultimate syllable, so like the second to last syllable, and if there's 3 syllables, that would be in the middle one. If it's just a 2-syllable word, then it's going to be on the first syllable. And if it's a 1-syllable word, then yeah, it's a 1-syllable word. But none of the roots are 1 syllable. Only particles can be 1 syllable. And now we have 3 particles. I have si, da, and yeah, I have da, si, and I might have said t earlier, and I'll explain why. I just forgot about my rule. There, it's C. It's pronounced C. It's spelled T-I, but it's pronounced C. And I'll explain that in just a second. But because of these stress rules, remember that there are suffixes in the verbs. There's the an and the ime, the me or the ime, or the imen if it's negative, and a question. Now, those don't move the stress over. The stress stays on the root's penultimate syllable, which means that what I wanted to do was mark that those extra syllables do not add, they don't move the stress over. So I actually marked them with graves. I could have just marked that with an accent if you add extra syllables. That's what some languages do. But I liked the grave accent idea better. It just looks aesthetically more cool. And I use acute accents for something else, which is if I have a compound word made up of two roots. The head root, which is what the noun is, and then there's a modifier root that just sort of like transforms that into a specific kind of that thing. The modifier root keeps its primary stress where it was originally, and so the new root, the head root, does not have primary stress. It still has like a secondary stress on whatever the stress syllable used to be, but the primary stress goes onto the first root. And so I marked that with an acute accent. So here I have a compound word, psychoevi. Evi means person, psycho means book. So this means scholar. And it's book person, basically. It's a person, so that's the main thing, the evi. And it has its secondary stress there, but it's psychoevi, not psychoevi. It's not psychoevi, it's psychoevi. So the stress goes here. And then there's still like a little slight stress on evi. Psychoevi. Psychoevi. So that is how compounds work with stress, and I use acutes for those. I use graves for the verby suffixes. All right. Now there's some vowel, or sorry, yeah, no, it's not just vowels. There is some sound change that happens in this language. And I put them in specific order. First, what happens is there is the vowel breaking that happens where these vowels will become those four diphthongs when they become verbs. So E becomes A, O becomes AO, E becomes Ye, and A becomes Wa. That happens first, and then there is a sound change where T becomes S before the letter I, so before E. So T becomes C, and that's why this is sequel, and that's why that particle is C for or, not T. I misspoke earlier. It's C. And what that means, since this happened after the breaking of the verbs, then you will have some words that when they are nouns, they're pronounced like an S, and when they're verbs, they are pronounced like a T, and vice versa. You'll have things that when they're a noun, they're not pronounced like an S, and when they become pronounced like an S when they're verbs. And I keep them spelled with a T because that's the phoneme, and it's kind of fun to have this be C. For me, I don't do that a lot in my conlang, so I thought that would be fun. And then there's some vowel allophony. This doesn't really affect anything. Basically, it just means that in syllables that are after the stress syllable, A gets reduced to schwa, like and E gets reduced to E, usually. That's just the thing with pronunciation. Now, here I have my lexicon so far. It's not a ton of words. These are my content words that exist in language that I've made. Not a lot. Again, this is single-use conlang. I don't need that many words to get my examples across. But I'm going to talk now about using this conlang, getting into examples. So I did the first few last time, but I'm going to go over them again and how I did them. So our situation A was the person is resting under the tree. And what we decided is that is going to be the tree is giving under to the person. The tree is undering the person. So under is what's happening. So if we go to our vocab, it's roca. Roca is under. Roca. Roca is going to become a verb then. So o becomes ao. So it's going to be rauca. Rauca mero is tree. Evi is person. So rauca mero evi unders the tree, the person. The tree unders the person. Okay, now we have the person goes under the tree. So now we have rauca, that's still what's happening. Evi rio mero. Rauca evi rio mero. So the person unders themselves. This is the reflexive pronoun. And then there's the tree. The tree is kind of like the extra, where did they under themselves? Oh yeah, the tree. The third sentence was the crow attacks the person. So attack is, attack is roteca. Roteca. is attack, roteca with a T, but that E is going to become a ye as a verb, and ye, that I, is going to cause that T to sound like an S, so it's going to become rosieca. So roteca becomes rosieca. Rosieca foroko evi. So rosieca foroko evi. The crow attacks the person. That's that sentence. Next, we have the tortoise gives the hare a carrot. So the tortoise is carroting the hare. Carrot is dhanai, but a is going to become wa. So it's going to be dhanwai because carrot is the verb. Devoro is tortoise, and gadiki, or sorry, not gadiki, gadiki is hare or rabbit. Gadiki. So it's dhanwai, devoro, gadiki. Then we have the person sleeps in the bed. So the bed sleeps the person. So venora is sleep, but it's venaura because it's a verb, venaura. Tetamo is bed, and then evi is person. So venaura, tetamo, evi, the bed sleeps the person. The person is asleep in the bed. The bed is giving sleep to the person. Now in F, the person gives themselves sleep in the bed. So it's venaura, evi, rio, tetamo. Reflexive. Now the person is doing it to themselves in the bed, sleeping. Sorry, I just realized how that could sound. Sleeping, they're sleeping. Okay, so G, scenario G, we could do this one live now. G was that the person falls from the cliff into the sea. Pretty tragic. So let's break that down. How we decided that's going to go is that the cliff gives the person a fall. So the falling is what's happening, but the cliff does it to the person. It's the point. It's like the source of the fall, just like the tortoise is the source of the carrot for the hare. The cliff is the source of the fall, and the sea is where they end up. So it's going to be fall, cliff, person, sea is how that's going to go, and fall is going to be a verb. So fall is dhoreka, and that's going to become dhoyeka because of that e to ye thing, or e to ye thing. So let's write the sentence. The person falls off a cliff into the sea. All right, and we're gonna, maybe I should zoom out just a tad. Okay, and so dhoyeka is gonna be the verb. And then it's the cliff, and cliff was rofoni, and then person evi, and then sea is faro. So dhoyeka, gofoni, evi, faro. What I do like about my whole system here is how much it cuts down on like all these prepositions and stuff. Like getting rid of the articles is already a thing that happens a lot if you don't have any articles in your language. Like most of my a priori that's not true. I have articles in some of my a priori languages, but if you don't have articles, that already cuts down on a lot from going from English to your conlang. But the syntax also allows me to get rid of all these words like to and off and into and stuff. That's all clear from the context and the word order, which I find fun to have be the situation. Now, the next situation was that the person jumps off a cliff into the sea. So it's going to be the same verb. I translate jump down here, but it is still fall. But it's the person is giving themselves a fall from the cliff into the sea. And I think what I decided there is instead of having both cliff and sea be at the end, sea is still going to be at the end, but I'm going to actually attach cliff to the verb. So it's going to be like they're going to cliff fall. So they're going to cliff modifier fall. So it's going to be cliff fall. So fall is still the verb, so it's dhoyeka, but it's going to be something. It's going to be gofoni e dhoyeka. So let me write the sentence first. Wait, it's not FGH. I did this before too. FGH. H is the person jumps off the cliff into the sea. And that's going to be cliff fall, so it's ofoni Oops. I need to put a hyphen. Grab a hyphen. Hofoni e doyeka the person themselves. Okay, so it's Evi Rio Faro. So the person cliff falls themselves into the sea. Hofonia doyeka Evi Rio Faro. Okay, now we have H-I. I is a situation where we have, interestingly, a person seeing the moon. And with these three scenarios, I had to do something interesting with like the arguments when I was thinking about what's happening. So instead of having person in these first two of these three seeing scenarios, there's a person and a moon in all three of these, and seeing is what's happening in all of them technically, but they're different kinds of seeing. So in the first one, the person is just kind of passively, it's in their vision. They see it. Are they paying attention to it? Not really. Are they looking at it, staring at it? Not really. It's just they can see it. So what I have there is that the moon is giving light to the eye. So it's light is the verb, moon, eye are the three things there. In the second one, the person is looking at the moon. They're like, hey, there's the moon. So here, the eye is giving itself the light of the moon. And so the moon is that extra thing. It would also make sense to do like moon modifier light, the person themselves. I actually kind of think, in my example before, I liked it there just because I like having the moon be its own thing. But I think it does make more sense. This oblique position and this adverbial position are not that distinct from each other. It's just kind of like a style choice, really, what you want to do with that. I think I am going to put moon before when I do this sentence, though. And then the third one, I do have the person. And here I have the I be the verb. And so what this person is doing, they're not just looking at the moon, they're staring at the moon. They're watching the moon. They're like, I'm on moon watch. Like, they're watching it like it's the television. Maybe there's like a lunar eclipse or something, and so they're staring at it. They're not just looking at it like, oh, look, there's the moon. It's like their full attention is being put on it. So their eye, the person is giving their eye to the moon. Basically. So those are those three scenarios. So I'm going to write those now. So it's going to be the person sees the moon. The person sees the moon. And then it's J is the person looks at the moon. And then K is the person watches the moon. Okay, so the first one is going to be light, moon, eye. So light is what's happening, the moon is giving it to the eye. So light is riomo, but wait, riomo is going to become riaumo because it is a verb, right? Just double check that. Yeah, riaumo. So it's riaumo. And then the moon is giving it. The moon is tozome. And then I is fico. So it's riaumo tozomi fico. Now the second one, the eye is going to give itself the light of the moon. So it's going to be, again, light. Actually, I was going to do moonlight. So it's going to actually be tozomi e riaumo fico rio. So the eye gives itself the light of the moon, the moon's light. There we go. And then the person eyes the moon. So eye is the verb, so it's fico. Fico is going to become feco. So it's going to be feco evi tozomi. All right, there we go. So those are all of our example sentences. Now I'm going to do a couple more just to show some of the other grammar stuff. I'm going to do one that has a compound, or not compound, well, I will do one that has a compound argument, but I want to do one that has a modified argument, like an adjectival argument, and that has like a different mood and evidentiality and stuff like that. And then I'll do another one that has an embedded clause. I want to do an embedded clause one. And I came up with this first one before, and there's just enough room on the page. Okay, so I'm going to do two more sentences. The first one is going to be a question, and it's going to be, would you not, or wouldn't you, would you not write a tortoise book for me? Tortoise book, like a book about tortoises, for me? Question mark. So some things have to happen. So who's doing what for who? So I need a person to write a thing for someone. So there's a couple things to think about here. So we have like a very, in most other languages, this would be like a textbook ditransitive situation because you have like write something for someone. In English, we could say write me a book or write a book for me, right? That's a dative shift situation. So my first instinct is maybe to make the tortoise book the verb. But the problem with that is then it just means, would you not give me a tortoise book? Would you not tortoise book me? And I mean, that could be fine, like in most circumstances, like that context would kind of allow that. But that could also just mean like, could you not give me a tortoise book? And I want writing to be what they're giving. So they're going to give writing. But the writing is what they're going to give to the book. Right? Because what I ended up doing here is I actually had ink be the verb here. I made a word for ink. And so it's going to be, ink is going to be the verb. And it's, would you not ink a book, would you not ink a tortoise book? And then for me, that me is going to be that oblique extra object instead. So that's how I'm going to do that. So here's how this works. So the word for ink, which is going to be the verb, is te. It's T-E-H-E, te, with that hiatus. But that first A is going to become a ye as a verb. So te is going to become sie, because the T becomes an S. Sie, and then would you not do it? Or wouldn't you do it is probably what we'd be more likely to say, but it's an irrealis because it's a would hypothetical, and it's negative because it's about wouldn't you, and it's a question. So we have like the maximum amount of things on the verb. So we have, to make it irrealis, so we add an R. Tied is would you ink, or you would ink, you would put ink on something, and then it's negative, so it's, and we have a consonant there, so we need the E. So I me, with the graves to show that those don't drag. The stress is still on sie, sierime, and it's a question, so add that N to the end. So sierimen, 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 would you not write? And so you is the subject, you is the doer, so you is going to be ye, that's a ye, because it's a ye, sierimen he, and then a tortoise book. So book is sequel, T-I-C-O, sorry, T-I-K-O, sequel. And then, but tortoise is devoro, and so that's going to modify it. So it's going to be devoro, kind of like we did with the moon up here. Devoro e sequel. And then it's for me, so you just put me, the first inclusive, or exclusive, because it's not for you, it's for me. exclusive. So view. There we go. So sierimen gi devoroj view. Wouldn't you write a tortoise book for me? All right. Strange sentence, but it gives more examples of that stuff. Now, the last sentence I'm going to do is an embedded clause. And I'm going to do it with, I'm also going to include a compound word. And it's actually it's my favorite compound word that I've made so far, just because of how hilarious the amount of vowels that are the same are. So here's how this is going to go. The sentence is going to mean the writer who you attacked ate a carrot. Yeah. So how is that going to get expressed? How is eating going to get expressed? That is the fun thing. So here's what I've decided to do with that. Since everything's about like giving the verb to the patient, here's how this is going to work. So the overall syntax is going to be the carrot is the verb. The person is giving a carrot. It's a third person who's giving the carrot to their stomach. So I have a word for belly or stomach, and that's going to be the patient. However, within this sentence, there is you attacked them. You attacked this person. So let's start with the overall verb. Okay, let's start with the overall verb. The overall verb, which we call the matrix verb, because the matrix sentence is the overall sentence, is, so I should probably write the English sentence. It's the writer whom you attacked. That's whom because they're the object, and that's going to actually matter for this language because it's going to determine the order. Whom you attacked ate a carrot. Okay, so carrot is the verb. They're giving their stomach a carrot. So thanai was carrot, but we know from the tortoise sentence, the original tortoise sentence, that as a verb it's thanwai. Thanwai. Because verb, and we can't go straight to the subject. The subject is the writer, and we'll get to writer, but writer is actually going to come at the end because it's the you attacked him writer. So that you attacked him subordinate clause is an adjective, so it comes before the noun. So it's kind of like now you have like brackets here, and you have your internal sentence. So I'm going to do like a little bracket there. You're not going to usually write that. Maybe I'll make a rule that like in writing you actually do need to put a comma there or something, but I don't think so. Thanwai, and you attacked him. So again, you is the subject of that embedded clause. Attacked is the verb, and attacked is going to come at the end because in subordinate clauses the verb comes at the end, not at the beginning. That's what differentiates them. And we know attacked is rosieka, and we know that from the crow sentence. Roseka will end this clause, but we have you attacked, and then we'll use a demonstrative, him. You attacked him, writer. So yeah. Let's see. That's going to be ye koe rosieka. And that's where that ends. I'm going to put another bracket up there. You attacked him, and then writer, which is my favorite word. So writer is going to be ink person. But not inky person. It's not ink a person. It's a compound that's put together to make a new word. So that is going to be ink, which is te, and then person is evi. And I need an accent on that first E to show that the stress goes here to show that it's a compound word. Tevi. There are 3 A's there. Te-e-evi. Tevi. And then, so finally we have our subject, and then the patient, so we have our agent, the patient is stomach or belly, which is vafamo. Vafamo. Okay, so the sentence is Thanwai yi koerosieka tevi vafamo. Thanwai yi koerosieka tevi vafamo. So yeah, carroted, you attacked him yesterday, writer, belly. Weird, but that's how this language works. So that is my showcase. This is like done an hour earlier than the technical end time. which I'm fine with because we are going to do a little bit of planning for what the next conlang is going to be, which is the a posteriori, which we'll do next time. Now, all I want to talk about with a posteriori, and I don't even know if we need paper yet. A posteriori, let me just review what that is again. Oh, one more thing. I wanted to talk about the name of the language. I named the language finally. And I made the name of the language a verb. Because what I wanted to do is the idea of like speaking or communicating. In this language, there is the noun, or like the, this non-verb is vome. Vome means thought or idea. And so the name of this language is the verbalized form of that word, vome, as an action, because actions in this word are also acts of giving from the agent to the patient. So it's like giving thoughts. So it's giving your ideas. So if you had a sentence to say like A told B something, it would be like vaume A B, because it would be like A gave their thoughts to B. So they communicated. So yeah, the language is called vaume, and I'm actually very happy with that. I like that, vaume, giving ideas. Vaume as an action. All right, that is vaume, a priori conlang. So I guess we can cross all these done because I did the revisions already. The revisions came in the form of like the compound stuff that I talked about and the accent stuff that I figured out. That was in between. So, and the H, all the spelling stuff, orthography, all done. Nothing super complicated because it's just single use. That's this conlang vaume. I'm very happy with it. I'm happy with how it's come out. I like how it sounds. And so, accomplished. Goal accomplished. Yeah, check. It was fun. So, a posteriori. A posteriori means that you are basing a language, your conlang, off of an existing language or multiple existing languages. So, you can go in many different routes with this depending on what kind of conlang you want, what goal you have for your conlang. If it's an oxlang, if it's an englang, if it's a naturalistic language, and is it going to be for fun? Is it going to be for a particular project? Is it for like an alternate history project? That's a really common and fun one, is like, what if this language had a daughter in this area? Like, what if the Roman Empire had like conquered this area? What would that language look like if you took Latin and evolved it in different ways? That's a very common one. There are an overabundance of romance languages that have been made as conlangs. I've made romance languages myself. I've done it a lot, so it's just a common thing. So the question then is, what kind of conlang do I want to do? And what source language / source languages am I going to borrow from? I kind of want to do a language where I evolve a daughter language naturalistically. That's a particular kind of a posteriori language. It is one of the more common kinds of a posteriori language. And this is distinct from, if I were doing some kind of auxiliary language between different languages and I was borrowing from multiple, I might have a system where I like have a sound system and then retrofit the words borrowed into that sound system to make this sort of blended language. I'm not going to do that. I want to pick an ancestor language, evolve it naturalistically with my own sound changes that I make up for fun, and then end up with a result language. Maybe it has borrowings from other things. There's definitely going to be some kind of grammatical shifts and paradigmatic shifts and stuff. I want to do that. I find that fun. On stream, I have made at least one Proto-Indo-European derived conlang, and I've made many others outside of stream. I've described another one I've done on a stream. It was a conlang showcase. So I wonder, and I've done a Germanic one. I derived a Proto-Germanic one. I also did a Celtic one too. I don't remember if I did that on stream, but I did do a Celtic one from Proto-Celtic. So I'm not sure what language I want to do in this journal series as the source language. Because it's really easy for me to do Indo-European languages, like Indo-European derived just directly from Proto-Indo-European. because I'm so familiar with that like root set and the phonology and stuff about it. And other Indo-European languages are fairly easy. Doing a romlang, I haven't done a romlang in a while, but as I was saying, there's an overabundance of those, so I don't think we need to make more. But because Latin is a really easy language to base conlangs on. And I've done Proto-Celtic, I've done Proto-Germanic. I don't want to do another Germanic language. Whenever I make a Germanic language, it just basically ends up being Gothic, because if I'm basing it on my aesthetic, what I enjoy, like what I would enjoy pronouncing and the sounds of, I basically just end up making Gothic because I like Gothic so much. So I'm not going to do that. I don't want to remake Gothic from scratch again. So I'm not going to do that. I am going to try to pick something that I usually don't pick as a source language. And I'm wondering if I want to do... That could be very fun. Okay, I have a couple ideas. I have not made a lot of languages that are derived from Greek, so that was one idea I had. Another idea I had was if I took like Sanskrit or something and made an Indic language from Sanskrit, but it was like it undergoes Grimm's law, like the Germanic consonant shift, but from Sanskrit. That could be interesting, although the consonant inventory of Sanskrit is so similar to Proto-European that it might just be Germanic again by mistake, with a slightly different vocabulary, obviously, and grammar, but it would be very Germanic adjacent, also because Sanskrit and Germanic share a lot of like cognate vocabulary. So it would actually be very similar to like as if it were a Germanic language, even though it's an Indic language. That could be fun, but also could be like a little too boring, or like too simple. Another idea that I've been wanting to do for a while, and it's been on the back burner, I like actually kind of forgot about it until just now, is I want to make an Anatolian conlang, but like imagining that the Anatolian conlang survived, maybe into like the classical period, or even like the Middle Ages or something. Actually, I really want to do that, a medieval Anatolian language. So like when I say Anatolian, that's a branch of the Indo-European languages that has completely gone extinct. Hittite, Luwian, Lycian, those are all extinct. That entire branch went away. But it's really cool. It has some cool features. But all those languages died out, and then of course you have like eventually in Anatolia you have other language groups. You have Turkic language speaking peoples coming in, and then that becomes Turkey, and you have the Ottoman Empire. You have a lot of Arabic influence, and there are a lot of other languages that end up being spoken in Anatolia. But basically the idea would be like, what if there was like an enclave of that language surviving, like Hittite, say. Maybe I'll have Hittite be the proto-language. That actually sounds really fun. But like maybe have some semantic shifts where like certain words become words that would make sense in a medieval context. That actually sounds like a lot of fun. I think that is the goal. Yeah, we're going to make a posteriori language derived from Hittite, or maybe just Proto-Anatolian. Maybe it's a cousin to Hittite or something. Definitely Anatolian. I want an Anatolian language. Modern Anatolian language. Or not modern. Medieval. I want a medieval setting, I guess, for the vocabulary at least. So that is the idea. So yeah, we have our idea for next week. Thanks for sitting through me just staring off into space and talking to myself. All right. Thank you for being here. Thank you for watching the series of journal analog conlanging. I'm having fun with it. I feel like a kid again, because this is what I did when I was a kid. I would just make conlangs in my journal. So thank you for coming on this journey with me. And I hope you have a good rest of whatever time zone you are in. Thank you, and farewell.